Hi, I'm Dan Franklin. Today I want to talk to you about reading comprehension. An alarming 69% of 4th graders and 70% of 8th graders read below the proficient reading level on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. This is a statistic from 2009. Based on some recent testing that our school has done, we've seen that, guess what? That's still around in our schools today. We have students in high school who are sophomores and juniors who are reading at a 4th grade level. As our school approached this, we saw that there really is a problem. So today what I want to do is I'm going to generate a series of videos to explain the problem a little bit, explain what reading comprehension is about, to explain one of our solutions. And one of the solutions we chose is called Reciprocal Teaching. And so without further ado, let's begin. Reading comprehension consists of 3 basic pieces that you have to consider when you're thinking about reading. The reader, you have to think about the reader, you have to think about the text, and you have to think about what we're doing with the text or the reading that they're doing. So some barriers to comprehension. When we look at the student, things that we need to look at are, do they have the skills that they need? Do they understand the language? You might think of this more when you think of Shakespeare or something like that, where the language is from a long time ago and it's vastly different from what kids use today. But that can be true in science as well, where we're talking about the electron and quantum mechanics and things like that, where the language is not the language they use every day. We also have to look at what strategies are they using to gain understanding of the text. And this could be as simple as, are they able to read fast enough that they can gather the information? Basically, word speed, the speed at which someone reads, can actually influence their comprehension. Because if they read a word so slow that by the time they finish it, they've forgotten the meaning of the previous word, then how can they gain comprehension of an entire full page or 2 pages or 10 pages of text? When we come to the text itself, some comprehensions problems that we see are, is the text informational or is it literary? Even though it might be a science text, are they using analogies that have no meaning for our students? This is especially true with students who live in poverty. They don't have the experiences or the knowledge that other students might have. How is the text organized? What are the complexity of some of the words that they use? Now, when most teachers think about teaching reading, they usually think of the activity itself. But this is something that, as we look at this with science, because I know myself as a science teacher, as we look at science, I know that as a science teacher, when I'd have students read, sometimes you can lose the meaning and the purpose of what you're reading. So we don't just randomly hand them a textbook and say, here, read this. We need to pick texts that help them gain the content knowledge while at the same time exercising their reading skills. So we have to be very careful about what text we read. That also includes, do the students know what they need to be doing while they're reading? What's the purpose? What are they going to do with the text when they're finished? Some things to think about. Some other general reading comprehension things to think about is kids have to apply the knowledge and skills that they bring to the table to the reading. That's the only way for them to make meaning from the reading. This can be very challenging when you're working with kids from poverty who don't have some of those experiences. And that also means that as a teacher, you have to know your students. You have to know what some of those experiences are. You may have to generate some of those experiences so you can have those conversations. And this is where, and especially in the more advanced classes where labs and things like that come into play, where you build the experience and now you can have them read about the experience and now you can talk about it, have a discussion. Sometimes they have to be able to recognize their purpose for reading. They have to recognize the author's purpose for reading. They have to be able to distinguish between fact and opinion, which that's super critical in science. They have to be able to come up with logical conclusions. They have to be able to see things through, all the way through to a logical conclusion. And so, yes, I'm talking about reading comprehension, but that also means they may have to write. Now, part of what the strategy that I'm about to talk about here in a minute really does for people is get them to do some metacognition. That's one of my favorite things, especially as a physics person. I love thinking about how I think about things. I often do math in ways that other people don't, or I'm very careful about thinking about how I do it. But part of it for reading is metacognition allows readers to think about what they're reading about, monitor what they're reading, adjust their reading based on the speed of what they're reading. And this is huge, especially in science, is identify that they don't understand something. A lot of our kids may recognize it at a surface level, but deeply they may see a word that's familiar to them, but they may not get the scientific context of it. And so being able to recognize that is huge, because the next step is fixing their understanding. So going through this, the biggest question that I think I get from teachers who are not English teachers is, I'm not an English teacher. That's the English teacher's job. And I would just turn that around on you and go, okay, you're faced with something new. How do you learn it? Okay, well, I go to YouTube and I watch a video. But that doesn't usually give you the depth of information that you need, especially in science context, because sometimes people are wrong. Sometimes people make mistakes in the science that they're presenting online. You have to be able to make sure that what you're teaching them is in line with the standards, which requires a lot of reading. The other thing is, when students go to college, what are they expected to do? Ultimately, they're going to be expected to do a lot of reading and be able to comprehend complex and challenging texts. And if they go into an engineering and science career field, which we want a bunch of our students to do, and they've never been taught how to read a science text, they're going to really struggle. And it's really up to us as the educator to prepare them to be successful. So in the next series of videos, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a thing called reciprocal teaching. Reciprocal teaching is a method that was developed by Palanskar and Brown in 1984 and has gone through many iterations. And there's research as current as 2014, 2015 on this reciprocal teaching method. It's a research-based practice that makes great gains in reading, and we'll talk about that some more in the coming videos.